pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Moving into winter, fall is coming to an end. I would like to see if I get a motion to accept tonight's agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Very good. And it looks like we get to jump right into fall athletic recognitions. I just want to say that I finally cracked the top 100 of the turkey trot this year. But Maura, you are way ahead, and some of you here in this room were far ahead of us. So looking forward to recognizing some of our athletes from the past fall.
Yeah. So good evening, everyone, and welcome. As I say often, these are my favorite moments of the year when we get the opportunity to recognize the real stars of our school district, and that's our students. And tonight we have the distinct pleasure of acknowledging some of our standout athletes from the fall season who have not only performed at amazing, impressive levels, sharing their talents with all of us, but they have represented themselves, their families, and our school community so ably. So I'd like to invite Mr. McCormick to utilize the microphone in the back of the room to introduce our coach that's here tonight and our student athletes and allow the board to recognize them for their great achievements.
Thank you, Dr. Harrison. It's my honor tonight. This is always a great time we get to honor our athletes. Tonight we have 5 of our fall athletes here and one of our fall coaches who's here. So I'll let him speak about his athlete in a moment. 2 of our coaches couldn't be here tonight. So the first athlete tonight is from our boys soccer team. He is senior Eric Pasternak. Eric is a 3-year varsity starter on the boys soccer team. This year he had 6 goals and 7 assists, although Coach Keating, who couldn't be here tonight, said he was probably involved in practically all the goals in some way this year that the team scored. Coach Keating said he's one of the best defensive midfielders in the section, often charged with marking one of the top players on the opposing teams. He was a captain on this year's team that went 7-9, lost in overtime, heartbreaking game at Valhalla in the sectionals. He scored the only goal in the team's 1-0 win over the eventual sectional champion Ryan Neck. He's a 2-time All-League selection, and this year was selected All-Section, Eric Pasternak.
I'm going to invite you to stand up and kind of parade through a little reception line and be congratulated by administration and board members.
Thank you.
Well done.
Congratulations. I also can hand you that.
Thank you. Congratulations, Eric.
Well done. Keeping with the soccer theme, Coach DiBenedetto could not be here tonight. He actually went home sick right after school. He looked terrible, so I told him, please don't linger too long. So we have 3 members of the girls' varsity soccer team that had an amazing season, 17-2-1 overall record, and were league champions and sectional finalists. The first player is junior Miranda Farman, who's a 3-year varsity starter, a 2-time All-League selection. This year had 6 goals and 13 assists. Coach D said her determination, high level of ball control, and soccer acumen are her greatest strengths, which aided her in her ability to score and set up her teammates. She was a member of 3 league championship teams and 2 sectional finalists. I think I mentioned this when girls basketball played. I think we were the best public school, Class B school this year, losing to Albertus Magnus, not only this year, but last year and the year before. So I think we do pretty well with the public schools. We have to work on the other ones. She is, as I said, for accomplishments, she was a 3-time league champion and 2-time sectional finalist. And for those accomplishments this year, she was selected All-Section, Miranda Farman. Well done. Here, can I give you? Next up, girls soccer player is senior Jess Green. She's a 3-year varsity starter and a 3-time All-League selection. She was a stalwart on defense that helped to account for 7 shutouts this year. Her hustle and excellent communication skills on the field were a main reason the opponent's attack scoring plays were thwarted. She was a member of 3 league championship teams and also 2 sectional final teams, and for her accomplishments this year was selected all-section. Jess Green.
Nice shoes.
And last but not least, our last soccer player of the evening is senior Zoe Maxwell. Zoe's a 4-year varsity starter. This year she had 40 goals and 12 assists on the season. She's the all-time Irvington goal scorer with an amazing 116 career goals. 3-time All-League selection, 3-time All-Section selection. Her explosive speed, great agility, and ball skills helped Zoe create many opportunities not only for herself, but for her teammates. For the week of October 14th this year, Zoe was selected as the Con Ed Scholar Athlete Award winner, one of the most prestigious awards in the county. She's a member of 3 league championship and 2 sectional final teams. She was named as the Westchester County Player of the Year by LOHUD, and that's with all classes. She was recently named First Team New York State Class B and one of only 5 Section 1 girls soccer players to receive first team status in any class with state recognition. For all her accomplishments this year, she was obviously selected all section and all state, senior Zoe Maxwell.
Where have you been? The girls who play soccer.
And our last athlete this year is from our boys cross-country team. Mr. Barry never passes up an opportunity to speak about his runners, so he had a tremendous season as a coach. Coach Thornton could not be here tonight, but Coach Barry will talk about Luke Carmesino.
Thank you for that glowing praise, Mr. McCormick. I just want to start out by saying I'm lucky enough to get to teach and or coach almost all these athletes and students in front of me, and they're not only great athletes, but they're wonderful people too. We should really be proud of how they represent us off the field as well and in the classroom. I have some notes because Luke's done a lot this year. Luke has been a varsity cross-country member since freshman year. He was all-league all 4 years in cross-country. This year, he won the Gressler Invitational, the Regis Invitational, and the Scarsdale Invitational, which are invitationals represent many schools from all over the county, big and small, Catholic, private, public. He was #1 in all those big races. He also won our league championship, leading our team to a league championship against a very good Dobbs Ferry team. On top of that, he was 3rd place overall in Westchester County. Again, that's everybody in Westchester County, large, small, all mixed together. He came in behind the 2 Fusco twins from Somers. He won the Section 1 Class C race up at Bowdoin Park, which he also won 2 years ago as a sophomore. Last year he was laboring with a knee injury, battled through it, and managed to, after not running for 4 weeks, run at sectionals and take 5th for us to help our team win a championship, and then sat out the state meet, which I know was hard for him, but he helped bring the team to the state meet. This year he was healthy, which was a great thing. He won sectionals again. He went on to the state meet. I was hoping, I actually thought about bringing a picture and I didn't think of it, but the state meet was in just outside Rochester. It was the worst conditions in 25 years of coaching I've ever seen. It was snow and mud and frozen mud. He embraced that and finished 3rd overall in the state. He went for the win. He was running with the leader. Leader was a little bit better than him, a kid from Glens Falls who ran great. But he laid it all out there, which is all you can ask for from your athlete. 3rd overall, by the way, is the best finish ever of any cross-country runner in Irvington's illustrious 62-year history. For that finish, he qualified for the Federation meet, which is the best of the best private, best Catholic, best public. He finished 25th there and ran a tremendous time of 16:36 on a really hard 5K course. Those of you who run, and Mr. Hanna, I did see your results on Facebook recently, so congratulations on that. Those of you who run know 16:36 for 5K with hills on mud is not easy. So, and again, like the girls on the track and soccer team, he's a wonderful young man. He's got the heart of a lion, and I'm very, very lucky to have gotten to coach him. So, congratulations, Luke.
Really exceptional. Great job. You got to congratulate Maura at the end. She didn't even know.
So, yeah.
Yes, we're going to stand up and take a photo with our athletes.
So all our student athletes, why don't you come up? Mr. McCormick,
Very nice.
Mr. Barry, why don't you come up for the photo op
Right,
here?
right up here. If you guys can come right up here, we'll take a photo.
Yeah.
And then the rest of us will. I'm telling them.
Yeah.
Good day. Why don't you come around?
I don't go back.
Or are you there?
I want to be near the 40 goal person.
Look it up. Look it up.
Yeah, we're out. We're out.
Why are we out?
We're out.
Oh, good. No, I think you just do those. Yeah.
And Mr. Barry, I heard you're going to turn Zoe into a long distance runner?
Well, you did have a pretty good run.
Or soccer?
Yeah.
Thank you. Very well done. Congratulations.
Question, because they always,
How many games are in the
in
soccer
a
season?
regular season?
40 goals.
Very good. All right. Well, we invite you to stay for the rest of the meeting.
Home and do homework.
Thank you.
Good night,
Bye,
thank
again,
you.
bye for coming. Thank you.
What's playing?
Well, in some ways, that was a prelude to our district update, some great news, but I'll turn it over to Dr. Harrison for some additional.
Yeah, I have just a few other items this evening. In the spirit of acknowledging our students, certainly want to congratulate our middle school and high school bands who kicked off our winter concert series last Thursday with a tremendous event. The kids really sounded great and were extremely entertaining. So I certainly want to congratulate them and thank them, and of course thank Mrs. McCumber and Mr. Scat for all their hard work in preparing our students. Want to remind the board and the community that there are two more concerts coming up on the campus. The orchestra will be next Thursday, the 14th, and the chorus has been moved to Monday, the 18th. So come on out and certainly be entertained.
I just want to say I had a very exciting train ride in today because they also went and played at MetLife today.
Yes.
So they went into the city.
Yes, they're a talented group. Also, just as a reminder to everyone with college on their radar, that coming up on the 7th at 7 p.m., our high school counseling department is hosting a college admissions case studies program where we're being joined by a number of admissions counselors from across the country that will lead students and parents in a mock admissions process. And there's also going to be a panel discussion at the end. So if college is in your near future, you might want to check out this great event. They are looking for RSVPs. So if you haven't done so already, hit our Facebook page, and there's a link there, I think the second story down currently, to sign up so they know how many folks to prepare for. Also, just want to float out there that the first story on our Facebook page is the annual Best of Westchester competition has kicked off, and we want to retain our title as the top district in in the readership of Westchester Mag. So certainly encourage folks to go on and vote for our school district. We've been the winners the last 2 years, as has our student-led website, Weather in the HUD. Again, links for that can be found on the district website. I do want to tease upcoming board meetings that on January 9th, we are going to welcome and introduce the leadership of the new Bulldog Booster Club. So we get to see Mr. McCormick again with the leaders of the Booster Club. So we can put faces with names and thank them for all that great work that they've launched on behalf of our students in the athletic program. And then, of course, the next meeting we are all looking forward to, which will consist of some updates on the strategic plan. And then finally, for me, just because of how calendar falls, I want to extend my best wishes for a happy Hanukkah.
Thank you. Wonderful. So I appreciate the update, and we're moving on. So next is an update on our Smart School investment plan. And I believe you'll stay back here.
You can take the mic and come up here, whichever you're most comfortable.
Our
I'm good
Director
back here.
of Technology, Jesse Lubinsky.
Hi, good evening. So this has been an ongoing process, our Smart Schools investment plan. Because it's been something that's been in the works for a couple of years, and there's been different phases to it, and because everyone up at the front of the room has not been a part of this, we figured that even though we were ready to move forward with the next phase, we just wanted to give a quick update on kind of how we got here, where we're going next. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with the Smart Schools Bond Act, New York State passed a bond several years ago. It was about $4 billion, I believe, to be distributed through the state. Allocations were given to each district based on a number of factors. Our district's allocation was $277,000. I think it was like $277,061. 51, okay, off by 10. So there's a long process for how you kind of go about getting these funds. Long story short, we've been proceeding with that. On June 28th, 2016, we actually came forward with a plan for how we wanted to allocate those dollars to the Board of Education. There was a process that involved not just receiving board approval, but posting a plan on the district website for 30 days, as well as allocating between several categories that were issued by the state. So the funding had to be spent within these categories. So we had actually planned to use our spending on two things. First was for the elementary Wi-Fi at Dow's Lane and Main Street. The second was for classroom technologies, which at the time, what we had said was that we wanted to get the elementary Wi-Fi in and then come up with a proposal for what we wanted to do with that additional classroom technology funding. We approved that resolution at the time, so no resolution is needed tonight. This is merely just an update to kind of let you know where we are with the spending. Last year, during last year's budget cycle, we had actually planned to spend approximately $160,000 on Chromebooks for grades K-12. When looking at that allocation and making decisions with regards to the budget, we actually had discussed at the March 21st board meeting last year that we should take the remaining money after the Wi-Fi was purchased, which left us with approximately $91,000, and we deducted that money from the Chromebook amount we were planning on spending, and then rolled that over to this year. So we have actually allocated, and you can see in the document we provided, the amounts that we were going to spend on the Chromebooks this year, and so we just wanted to kind of bring you guys an update. And
Just, Jesse, what is the, and as the board and some community members may recall, it was quite an arduous process in that when the original Smart Schools investment grant opportunity surfaced from New York State, we were one of the first districts out of the gate in starting our process and putting in our initial, I want to say paperwork, electronic filings. But where we ran into the challenges was because it was Wi-Fi, it was considered an infrastructure project, and we had to go through the state facilities approval process. And the state didn't have the process constructed to support that work as of yet. So we sat in a holding pattern for several months before they kicked off the process. And by the time they did that, they kept sending us through different levels of review. We had to have our architects come in and do work to be able to support this.
It was a
Took
lot
us
like building
almost 2 years to be able to get the Wi-Fi installed because of bureaucracy. But in looking at this process as where we are now, obviously we don't have to deal with that bureaucracy, so can you just give us some expectations?
Sure.
From the field?
So from the time, and just to kind of give you some hard numbers, from the time we submitted the initial proposal for the Wi-Fi to when it actually was approved and went in was a little over a year, actually. So the difference here is that because we're not actually doing anything that involves going inside the walls, there's no facilities process that's needed. This is merely just an approval process from New York State. Two things to consider. The first is New York State has sent a lot of the grants back that were in the classroom technology domain simply because they've wanted more instruction or direction from the district in terms of how they planned on using the devices. So we were very thoughtful about only going out to spend this money on Chromebooks because many of the districts who'd had their grants sent back to them were requesting different types of devices within that spending allocation, and so therefore we're asked to kind of come to a decision process about how they concluded to come to one device versus the other. The nice piece about leaving that out of the Smart Schools bond is that if we decide that we do, for instance, in Dow's Lane, want to continue at the K-1 level with something like iPads, we can still do that out of the general budget but not have to worry about an approval process through New York State. So the way we crafted our proposal, because we actually held off for 1 year on purchasing the planned devices for last year, we can still go forward spending all that money on Chromebooks and still be within the planned amount of desired Chromebooks for the classrooms that we had kind of put forth last year. The timeline, again, this is a tricky kind of, I don't want to stand here and guess because some districts have been in queue for a short time, some for longer. Really what it boils down to is when New York State wants to meet to release those funds. So there was actually a point where we were at the end of the queue, ready to go, and I feel like that was last February or March, and then we didn't get approved till June simply because the committee kept canceling their meeting. Insider information that kind of Dr. Harrison and I were kind of made privy to was the fact that New York State just had already was releasing a lot of funds at once and didn't want to kind of let everything out at one time. So the quicker, and this is why we wanted to get this done now, is so we can get in queue already and start our way through the process. So because we're asking for one flavor of device, we don't anticipate there being a lot of pushback. But again, New York State can be kind of finicky when it comes to stuff like that.
Well, thank you very much.
And do you have any questions?
So I just wanted to confirm, so the Wi-Fi is in, done, completely finished?
The Wi-Fi at the elementary schools are, yeah, it's in.
Okay, so then the last amount, and I do obviously remember this conversation last year, but so $62,000 for 316 Chromebooks, and those have to, but the money hasn't come in, therefore it hasn't been purchased.
So what we're about to do is actually give a plan to New York State saying that we want to spend our remaining $91,000 with that breakdown. So the 336 Chromebooks, or 316 Chromebooks, the management console license, which is what allows us to remotely administer those, as well as the Tech Tub trolleys, which are the mobile units that allow us to move those from one room to the other so that teachers can borrow or share those devices. So that's the plan that's going to New York State, is to say that this is what our allocated spending is going to be. As you can see, it's not very complicated. It's pretty straightforward. The rationale actually fits with an established district plan. So that's why we don't anticipate a lot of pushback on that end from the state. The timing is the tricky part. I think, yeah.
You have to actually spend the money to get reimbursed.
That was my next question.
But we can't
The
spend the
reason-
money until it's approved.
So we're waiting for approval, not for the money to come in, because we spend the money, we get the approval, then we spend the money, then we get reimbursed.
Correct. If we were to spend the money before getting the approval, then it's not reimbursable.
I remember that too.
And how long does that approval, do you think the approval will take?
That's the unknown
I
part.
thought it was the releasing of the funds was the unknown.
No, that part actually, oddly enough, hasn't been as problematic. It's been the, and as I said, originally when we had talked about this a few years ago, our thought was do a comprehensive analysis of devices in terms of what we wanted to purchase. Since then, we've made a clear movement in the Chromebook direction. By holding off on the amount we fully wanted to purchase last year, that's made it a lot easier to go forward with a plan that we feel will move quicker through the process, as opposed to one which blends devices and may receive some questioning from New York State as to why we're choosing to do something different in certain grades or buildings, whereas here we're coming forward with a consistent model that we're looking to use.
And my only other question was, the technology plan was done a few years ago, and now with every year that, or with every month, I suppose, that we're so-called delayed in purchasing Chromebooks. Does there come a point in which 316 Chromebooks no longer fits with the technology plan because technology is changing and there's something else out there, or this still fits squarely within what you see?
I think this definitely fits squarely with the existing plan, and I would anticipate that the plan, when we go to do a plan update, that you'll see that it still fits with the plan. I mean, when we take a look at what the goals of that plan are, we see that it fits with flexible, student-centered computing. This clearly fits within that. The cost model of a Chromebook versus going to another mobile device like a laptop or something similar, I mean, there's no comparison between what we can do with one versus another for the comparable price point. So I anticipate this is something that we'll be sticking with moving forward because it does align with many of the goals we have stated in the plan.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Oh, wait.
Appreciate it.
I'm sorry, Jan. Can you just refresh my memory about the security with the Wi-Fi in the elementary schools? You know, the
Specifically?
security- We talked, I remember there's a whole thing about, with kids with phones in Main Street School, for instance, if they get on the Wi-Fi, how are they protected from getting onto different things?
Right, so there's no open Wi-Fi.
It's all
It's all locked down with the exception of a couple of conference rooms where, often guests are. So for instance, we have guest Wi-Fi here on campus in the library, but you wouldn't be able to find guest access anywhere else. So with the exception of those spots, everything requires authentication. In addition, even teachers' personal devices, they don't authenticate through a screen. We went to staff meetings and actually connected their devices to a private subnet, which isn't visible to the public in the elementary buildings. Yes?
Very good, thank you. So we'll now move to our committee reports, and I'll go in order here. So is there someone who'd like to give the Buildings and Grounds report? Catherine?
Buildings and grounds. All right, well, I was just looking over my notes. We went through a debt service review and RFP for architectural services. We talked about the RFP for architectural services to begin to put together the projects for the bond that we anticipate having at some point down the road. That was, yes, so we need to do a bond anticipation note, the RFP for the architect. That's basically all I have in here. But do you have any other things from the BMG besides the talking about the bond anticipation note and some of the projects? Carol, did you have anything else?
Yeah, we started to work on the planning process and creating the steps that are involved, which we now have to continue to talk about. And we reviewed the debt. Basically, those are projects, starting to create the project list tentatively. It's all planning right now.
I would anticipate that the next Buildings and Grounds meeting is going to be a rich meeting where we begin to dig into evaluating our process, looking at potential timelines, models for community engagement, and then we will have a richer conversation, I think, at the Board of Education level, beginning to map out some of the thinking. But certainly there's going to be, if the recommendation from the committee is to move forward to pursue a bond, looking at the timelines and the demands that will be associated with that. I can say that Carol has been working hard on developing a whole sample project timeline that will help guide the committee's conversations and ultimately a recommendation to the full board.
I think one of the things that it's important to note is that, we've thought about some of the projects that in alignment with the strategic plan and where some things would fit in well in terms of, technology goals or language goals or some other projects, what we might be doing for buildings and grounds that could align with that.
I guess I would just, obviously, there's a lot of troubling news out there, so I think some of that'll come into the conversation in terms of, federal tax reform or,
There's no question. So I think any conversation that we have with respect to budget, and public finance, so we're going to, not only looking at the district's general fund, the general budget, but looking to our debt service, the management of debt service, consideration of what is sustainable on both fronts moving forward. So anything that we would look to introduce related to a capital project, debt neutrality would be a focal point of our discussion. So trying not to introduce new taxes. So, that would be our philosophical and strategic approach to it. But what we have to be considerate of, as you reference, are all the factors in the environment that are coming down. So we can certainly look to what's happening in DC, and I was going to say trickle down, but those that are flowing upstream to us, and the impacts that it's going to have on our community members. But then we also have to be mindful of what's going to come down from Albany then, and the news that we've been reading for the past 3 weeks with respect to the state's fiscal woes, and a number of, $4-point-some million of deficit that's coming our way, and how that potentially could impact schools. I think school funding, where you certainly could look at tax cap as one area, that influences us, but we have to look at what big picture of what's sustainable, and what's really just not only to the district and to provide the experiences that we want for our kids, but what's reasonable for our community to consider as well.
I guess one opportunity you get with a bond that you don't get otherwise is that the state reimburses a portion of the bond. I think our prior bond, it was 23 or 24%, something like that.
Any project over $100,000.
Capital project. Yeah. So to take advantage of that, to your point, it is aidable then.
Yeah, very good. Okay. Well, thank you. Any other items from Buildings and Ground? We'll move on to
That's it.
communications. I think at our prior meeting, our last committee report, we updated the timeline in terms of the website, which remains the same in terms of unveiling the whole of our new website in the spring. I want to give a lot of credit to Maura, who's on the communications committee, because she's been doing a lot of work with trying to improve understanding and transparency when it comes to communicating the role of the school board. I'll just share in today we debuted with the agenda, a little overview, so if someone hasn't come before to a board meeting, it gives them a resource to sort of understand the role of the board and the operation of the meeting. I don't know if ours has it, so I'll pass down the one that's there for community members. So Maura helped to draft that. We reviewed that and felt like it was something that would help members of the community when they come to a meeting. We also have revised and put out another edition of the board briefs, which went out this week, and in that we're linking to presentations from past meetings and letting folks know about upcoming presentations as well. There's one thing we added this time and we'll go forward with for the foreseeable future is links also to parent advisory committees for each of the schools, their minutes, because I think a lot of times in terms of understanding the role of the board, many of the things that parents might think they want to reach out to the board for can also be handled by a parent advisory committee, and so this is an opportunity to stay on top of what's happening in each building on that level. So that additionally, we're looking at in terms of Maura's also helping with developing a somewhat longer introduction, more detailed introduction when we come out with the website about the role of the school board, and has been reviewing what other school boards, other districts have done on that front. So just trying to improve transparency and understanding. One other new step we've taken is that we've created a Google account in which when we reply to certain communications in terms of getting, we've had ones about world language or transportation or insurance. In the past, that's only gone pretty much to the person or people who've made the request. But now, via that a link on the board briefs, other members of the community are able to now read those letters as well and get informed as well, so that we're improving transparency on that front. So those are a few things. I don't know if there's other things that I've missed or we want to add. But, very good. So next up, we actually did have a curriculum committee meeting early this morning, and it was very productive. I was really appreciate the opportunity. It was so on the curriculum committee is Mr. Graber, Ms. Kashkin, myself, and we met with Dr. Harris and Dr. Kaur, and we talked about a number of different topics, including one of our initiatives, ongoing, is understanding work with developing program assessment. And we also have a brain fart here, but because there were some heady topics, but we discussed additionally approaches to addressing technology in instruction, so that was an interesting conversation, and we're going to follow up on those in our January meeting and hopefully be able to provide some more feedback about what we're learning. And one thing that was really great that we'll share out with the board is existing curriculum instruction and assessment plan that Dr. Kaur shared with us, as well as an overview of professional development for the 17-18 year, which I think we'll all appreciate having a chance to review and ask some questions about in the future. So all in all, a very productive opportunity to understand and where a lot of our work in instruction and curriculum is going, and not taking up as much time in a board meeting, but making sure that we can report back to you or share these sorts of documents as they become available. I think we'll probably try and get it out on the weekend update or to the rest of the board.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then policy is the next committee.
Just working through the policies, Michael.
What are some policies you guys are
I
looking
couldn't
at?
even tell you off the top of my head, but,
Yeah.
what are the numbers?
We can share, yeah. The 4,000 series.
The 4,000 series, which encompasses offhand.
Special education work.
Okay.
In particular, I think a lot of the conversation was really about RTI and changing the whole language policy about
The RTI's response to intervention.
response to intervention, we talked about the new terminologies.
Not called RTI anymore.
MTSS.
Oh, just when we figured it out, we have to learn the new.
Get rid of that acronym because it no longer applies.
We talked about a little bit about that and a lot about that, actually. A big part of the process was really looking into the policy piece and changing some of the language around that. I think we also talked a little bit about the period of requesting an evaluation, some of the language in that particular article in the 4,000 series. Now it took up, that was a big part of the conversation that led into the RTI conversation. Then I had to call some action.
And just always a reminder, I think big picture, what we're doing is we've had a lot of the policy on the books for a while, and with the help of the New York State School Board Association, which has provided some model policy, you're reviewing that and adjusting it relative to our district, and then we are reviewing and approving those updated policies.
And I will say, all jokes aside, that it is, I find, very interesting because we're literally going through the policies one by one, reading them with the administrators in the room and asking questions when we have an opportunity to where we don't understand something, but more importantly, making sure that the policy as it was written when it was adopted however many years ago still applies today, because in this world of education, as we all know, things are changing, as was the example with RTI. So it's a methodical, slow, laborious task, let's be honest, but I do think it's highly worthwhile, and we're getting through them at a good speed.
Good clip.
We've got objectives.
Wonderful. And I just want to take one opportunity also that in addition to our committee and liaison roles, we often attend events, regional events, and I know that Deb and Maura, you both went to a Westchester Putnam School Board Association in relationship with the area BOCES, looking at technology and how different districts, what their approach or some of their initiatives are. I don't know if you want to share some highlights or reactions to your experience.
Sure, I even brought the handout. I was so excited. So we attended the Technology Summit, which was hosted, as Michael said, by the Westchester School Board Association on Thursday, and it was entitled Student Engagement and Personalized Learning in 21st Century Schools. And Maura and I were both there, and it was kind of like a speed dating, I jokingly said, presentation where there must have been 10 presenters from Westchester schools, all of whom had no more than 7 minutes to make a very brief presentation on what their schools are doing. And the objective, as I understood it, was really for school board members to reflect on the question, what is on the 5-year horizon for K-12 schools? And each of these schools invited to participate spoke about what they're doing and what their process looks like and how they're approaching it. And they had speakers from each of the school districts that were either instructional technology teachers, STEM coordinators, there was assistant superintendent for curriculum, an education technology specialist. So it was really interesting to hear what each of the different schools are doing. They, like us, have a technology plan that they're rolling out, but each school is tackling it differently, and they each spoke on different topics. So, for example, some schools talked about the importance of computer science and making sure it was part of all learning in K through 12. Others talked about professional development. A few other schools talked about recent purchases and new technology that they're trying out in the classrooms. Some actually spoke about how their teachers and administrators were stepping back and talking about a larger picture question, such as what does an innovative classroom look like, and they spent a whole year with teachers discussing that. Some were really just trying to define terms that are floated around, like makerspace and STEAM. What does it mean? We all hear it, but what does it actually mean to that particular district and that classroom? And then some other districts who had already had some bond financing and had some money were talking about their newly created space, and some of the schools called it active learning and makerspace. They showed photographs of it. And I thought that most of the presenters were emphasizing that this is not about purchasing technology, it's not about hardware, it's not about furniture, but it's about a conversation, which obviously this district has had, and it's about reflecting with teachers, those who are actually going to be using technology, what it means to them, how they're bringing it into the classroom, are they consistent, are we staying current, are we using things that aren't working, are we using other things that are working, one of the districts talked about how they used an entire superintendent conference day to talk about technology with their teachers. So I thought it was very interesting. I don't know if you want to add anything more. We both had our heads spinning, as we usually do at the end, because there was a lot of information for so many presenters. But I find that those presentations make you stop and think about, what we're doing. And it even inspired me to go back and read our technology plan.
Right, which if anybody else is...
Which not many in this room could say.
If anybody's inspired, like Deb, to go back
36
and look.
pages.
It's, we have I think you said it's a 2014 to 2018 technology plan that was adopted by the board I guess it must have already been in play in June of 2015. But so it sounds like maybe in the next year or so we'll be revisiting our technology plan.
Can I just add something? One of the things, and I know it's not where you focus, but, one of the new hot button words is this personalized learning.
Yes.
And so everyone is attaching it. So they're attaching it to technology. So on Friday, Chris is going to say, Rainey, you should have put this in the update. On Friday, 2 of our teachers actually presented on personalized learning at a conference, Empowering Learners, which was a Northern Westchester conference. Designed for teachers and administrators, but the presenters were mostly teachers. And I was really proud. 2 of our teachers, Liz Winiger, a 3rd grade teacher, presented on Genius Hour. And Jen DeLisi not only presented on empowering learners and how she teaches in a personalized learning way in her classroom, she was also invited to be part of a panel that was representative of a superintendent, assistant superintendent, maybe a director of technology, and Jen was invited to be the voice on the panel around personalized learning and the importance of really looking at what we're doing. And part of that is technology, there's no question, but it's not only technology. So, so it's really interesting how everyone's attaching that to like the big topics, so it's great.
I thought.
That was interesting, thank you.
It was, and actually, I mean, I don't know how many here actually, if you want to explain what personalized learning means. I mean, that was a new expression that I was wondering when I first saw it in the title. Is that personalized learning the teacher personalizing the instruction, or is it making learning specific for the student? And so that's what I was listening for.
So do you want to say?
No, I would not want to say. I would prefer, I would prefer you to share.
Well, it's actually interesting. So the keynote speaker, Allison Zamuda, I don't think it's how she says her name. She does a lot of work and has been partnering in books with Benna Kalick. So Benna Kalick has done a tremendous amount of work out there on habits of mind. That's really Benna Kalick and Art Costa. And Allison is now sort of working with Benna as well, and they've coined, I don't know if they've coined this phrase personalized learning or it's just out there at this point, but actually as part of the keynote she had the people in the audience doing turn and talk and asking as educators, what do you think it is? And I think it's really interesting. I'm not 100% sure, like we talked about, well, what's the difference between personalized learning and differentiation of instruction? So, I think there's definitely a push for this whole idea of using an IEP, an individualized education plan, but not through the lens of special education, but knowing what every child needs in your classroom, using technology as one resource to build that learning environment. But personalized learning does not mean one-on-one. It doesn't mean that every child has their own. It means that the teacher is doing two things, taking into consideration the needs in her classroom, which I would call differentiation, so I'm not 100% sure it's different. But it's also giving kids, it's empowerment. It's trying to give kids more voice in their learning is really what I think is the distinction between some of the older phrases around meeting the needs of all learners and personalized learning. So I don't know if you heard that, if that's what you heard, or if you heard something different.
I did, I thought it was, and I was listening for, because not every presenter touched upon personalized learning, but clearly what they were discussing was how they were using technology, computer science, and instruction to personalize the instruction. But I also thought it was interesting when they were talking about personalized learning that they were indicating how you bring computer science and technology into all the creative areas as well, music and art and graphic art, and that to me was interesting because they were saying that as the students progress, especially in high school, each student's going to be looking to dive deep into different areas, and that technology has to go in each one of those areas, and we have to personalize it. So that was and I also thought the IT help desk was interesting. Like they talked a lot about how new courses in the high school and giving students opportunities to collaborate, create, but also to assist the rest of the school community, and that was another form of personalized learning. So there was a lot of, as I said, our head was spinning when we left. Would you agree, Maura? I mean, it wasn't like we walked out of there by any stretch ready to summarize this.
You had to kind of digest, and I think that the looking at the Irvington plan also helped to put this into context. For me, I don't know about you, Deb.
Yeah, definitely. And the PLTW was helpful too to go back and look at that. So I encourage you all to do the same.
Yeah, in the spirit of advertising, I think the Westchester Putnam School Board Association puts on some great events and activities, learning activities for school board members. So I think this is a case in point of the opportunity we get from participating. So thank you, and thank you for bringing that back for us so we can have some perspective on it. All right, so does anybody else have anything to share back from committee liaison roles? Very good. We will now move on to comments from members of the community. These are on topics that appear on the agenda, and we would ask that you would use the microphone in the back if you have a comment, and that you would keep your comments or questions to 3 minutes and direct them to myself. Are there any comments? Very good. So now we have what's called a consent agenda, which allows us to speedily move through a number of business items, which is one of the main purposes of our meeting this evening. So can I get a motion to accept our consent agenda? All right, so I think Brian just got out slightly in front, and David the second. Any questions before I call for a vote related to any items? Very good. So I would ask, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And are there any, let me look ahead here.
Scholarship fund.
There's
you
the,
wanna say?
yes, I just want to point out the Christopher J. Massa Scholarship Fund, to thank Janet and Bill Hildreth for their contribution to it. Very much appreciated. And I believe that covers that area. So we now move on to, again, community comments, but this time more broadly to questions related to the school community. Are there any comments? Very good. So in that case, our next public meeting will be on,
January 9th.
no, it's listed incorrectly here. So it's listed incorrectly here. It's actually December 19th. You can also come on January 9th, but our next meeting is December 19th. It's a good one. We'll be talking about next steps on our district strategic plan. So that's talking about our vision and how we are moving forward with that. So I encourage everyone to attend. We will now move into executive session for the purpose of discussing employment history of particular persons and collective bargaining. Can I get a motion to move to executive session?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So moved, second.